Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast where we put ourselves through whatever this is, where we rewatch movies from our past that we either are confident still hold up, or might not still hold up. Hint, hint. This week's movie. Sometimes outright good movies, or sometimes outright bad ones. So just basically movies that we sort of have some sort of nostalgia or memory for. And we sort of just basically examine them and see how they lasted. I'm not gonna bury the lead, Chris. Coming straight in. This movie does not fucking hold up. And this week we watched Dumb and Dumber, which is, I'm shocked to say, one of the worst films I've had to we've sat through for this. I'm genuinely, couldn't believe it because I loved this movie.
This is the biggest discrepancy between sort of memory and what it is.
Yeah,
even something that I thought was great, like The Girl Next Door. I would have, if someone had said, "What's The Girl Next Door like?" I'd have been like, "Yeah, that's all right. There's some sweet moments in it," and that memory would have been wrong. But if someone had said to me, "What's Dumb and Dumber?" I'd have been like, "It's a stone cold classic. It's hilarious," and maybe it still is a classic film. But it's not hilarious.
No,
that's one of the big things. But yeah, watching it, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, and well, let's start. We'll start with our relationship to the film. Obviously, young Dan was the exact right age to be a massive Jim Carrey fan. That just was what it was. All of it. Ace Ventura, The Mask, which all came out the same year. Liar Liar, like 1 year later. Like I lapped it all up. I just watched everything he did. And while he does bring a lot of energy to this performance, in hindsight, I don't think this is the best example of his work. And I'm just talking specifically about his performance even in this isn't great. But I think, as a kid, I think I just found the puerile humor funny, because you do when you're a child. When you watch this movie as an adult, and you try to take it as a movie, I remember this movie having some amount of heart. I remember enjoying the relationship between the two characters because they were such good friends. With adult eyes, Chris, it's a very cynical, mean movie, and these two people are horrible to each other all the time. But young Dan didn't see that, I guess. Because
so what was you just basically you remember watching it as part of your sort of Jim Carrey love?
Yeah, I remember very distinctly choosing to see this movie because I remember being blown away. I think I saw Ace Ventura first. And I remember being absolutely blown away by Ace Ventura as a child. I'm very scared to watch that for this now, because I know Ace Ventura doesn't hold up in one way, because there's a very specific thing I remember that's bad. And it's been referenced a few times in recent years. But I thought the rest of the movie might still function. I now wonder, because this doesn't. But yeah, I just thought it was genius. I thought it was so funny. I just thought it was evidently I didn't care too much about the story or the characters, but whatever was amusing me about it clearly worked for me at the time. So yeah, it was one of those movies that we just rented all the time from the local, like, I don't know, Blockbuster or whatever it was, over and over again. I saw this movie an absolute ton when I was a kid, and then I don't remember going back to it really, and that's, I think, where I've gone wrong. Yeah, I think I wanted to revisit it around the time of the sequel coming out, but I don't think I got round to it. Grateful.
Did you watch the sequel?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. I think we had this conversation recently. I don't really remember the sequel. And I'm not talking about When Harry Met Lloyd. I mean the one that literally came out like 2 or 3 years ago. I think
we might have even discussed it on here, but
I don't think I remember it. Like I think I've seen it, because I can piece together quite a bit of that movie in my head, but then there's a part of me that goes, did you maybe not see it and you're remembering the trailers? Because there are a lot of holes in your memory of that movie.
Yeah, and it was quite...
I think I saw it.
It was also... So I'm trying to fix my wind guard. It was also quite a detailed trailer.
Yeah, so there is every chance that I did just see a trailer and never actually got around to seeing the movie. I wouldn't rule that out. I believe I can't imagine me not getting around to seeing a sequel to a movie that I had such fond memories of.
Yeah.
But the movie I remember enjoying had a lot of heart and all that stuff, and it doesn't in reality. But I'm very curious. Did your... Because my story for it, in terms of my history with it, is just that I was very young and I found it very funny. There's not a lot to that, but did you? I don't know if you had more of a history with
I
it.
think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was on like ITV one day, or presumably one evening, and my dad was like, "Oh yeah, we can." I don't know if we watched it together or if he was just like, "Oh yeah, you can watch that." I mean, I think I was younger than 12. It's a 12, but so I remember. I'm pretty sure I watched it on telly, loved it, just found it hilarious, and then this is one of those things where I had the video, I had the VHS of it, and would have rewatched it a bit at the time. I don't think, and it sounds like we're both making excuses, but I don't think I've seen it since then. I don't think I watched it at uni or anything, or maybe, you know what, I feel like, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like maybe, I did sit down with someone and be like, should we watch Dumb and Dumber? And even then was a bit like, oh. Nah, and I couldn't remember that before, or even when watching it, but now that I'm talking out loud about watching it, maybe that happened. But I certainly never enough to... you certainly are never in this kind of analytical way where it's like, oh, damn. So, yeah, but as a kid, absolutely loved it, found it hilarious. I remember watching it and laughing my ass off at certain parts. And to be fair, the parts I really remembered, the jokes I remembered, there are some jokes that are still funny. The bike, swapping the bike for the car, and I would say 1 in a million. So you're saying there's a chance, Yeah,
I think that the funny thing about that joke is that's always the line that gets pulled. But I actually think the payoff to that is actually a few minutes later when he finds out she's married and he goes, "What was all of that 1 in a million stuff?" That's the line that made me chuckle.
And I was quite hopeful. I will say I was quite hopeful at the start because there was 2 bits in a row where I was like, I don't remember that at all because it's quite subtle. One was when the limo window goes up and his nose goes up with it. And then the second one was when he skirts through all the traffic and there's a big fireball in the background.
Yes.
And I was like, maybe on this watch, we're going to be like, all the subtle nuances. We didn't notice the subtlety as a kid, but that's the really funny stuff. And there's some of that, but not that much. Those are the only 2 examples off the hand I can think of. That and Jeff Daniels' performance. I think Jeff Daniels is still delivering a wonderful performance.
Yes.
And I think Jeff Daniels is a lot better than Jim Carrey. And again, I think as a kid, you think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Because what Jeff Daniels is doing is a little bit more nuanced, although that's obviously too grand a word and description for what it is. But it is more, I think it's a more nuanced performance. It's a more subtle performance, and it's obviously so different to his other work. Whereas a lot of watching it this time, I was like, a lot of this is Jim Carrey doing Jim Carrey. And a lot of the worst stuff, like the fantasy sequence where he has the fight, which is obviously horrific for a number of reasons. But that feels like plonk that out And you could be what that could be in any Jim Carrey film, or at least, in a lot of them. Well, not nowadays. But, that felt like that was an Ace Ventura moment. It felt like it could have been in The Mask. Change the makeup, get rid of the tooth. And I think there's a lot of, but as a kid, that would have been quite appealing because, as you say, Jim Carrey was the bee's knees. So I think as a kid, you want Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey, and you're drawn to that. As an adult, you're more drawn to Jeff Daniels' performance. But the problem is, I think the two big problems, and the two reasons I'd go, shit, I don't think this holds up, is one, it's not as funny as I remember, or rather, the humour is quite juvenile. So as an adult, it's difficult to click with because the funny moments are quite juvenile and don't feel that funny. And obviously within that, there's also more instances than I remember of humour that's not aged well at all.
Correct.
And
don't worry, we're going to get to the casual homophobia.
There's so much casual homophobia, casual racism, like it's bad. Derogatory to women.
Yeah, deeply derogatory to women. Yep, correct.
So there's that side of it, which I'd label all of that maybe humour or lack of. And then the second part, it's actually the core premise is actually quite good. Like the notion that the man is so stupid he doesn't realise he's accidentally interrupted a
ransom handoff,
a ransom handover, and is then got the money and is chasing the girl, but also at the same time the hitmen are chasing him. And so the start of that, like when he steals the briefcase, I'm sat there going, this is still an excellent premise for a movie, but the logistics of it,
how
the
it actually
logic
plays
of it,
out,
how it then plays out, just falls apart with like 2 or 3 questions. It's madness. This woman's, her husband, I'm sorry, having a line of, well, you've got to carry on, like, isn't enough. And like they kept referencing like the ball, and I'm like, oh, maybe the kidnappers don't want like a development to go through or something like that, because I think at one point they referenced like a deal, and I'm like, maybe it's time. Nope. And like, talk about Deus Ex Machina and Smoking Gun with spoilers, the conclusion of the woman we've seen a couple of times being an undercover cop, where you go, well then, what do you mean we've been tailing these guys for 8? Arrest them. What? Like, what? Just send in Lloyd, like, to do the work? What's going on here? And the problem is, bizarrely, whilst the characters are hyper real, and it's a blackmail scenario and a ransom scenario, the rest of the world doesn't feel that hyper real. The rest of the world doesn't feel as stupid as Harry and Lloyd. So when that plays out in the end, and suddenly you're dependent on the distilled belief that these characters are hyper real as well, it jars, because some of the comedy has come from people that aren't hyper real, looking at Lloyd and Harry and going, what the fuck?
Which is how it should be. I mean, the movie's called Dumb and
Which
Dumber.
is what it should be. Yeah, and that's absolutely how it should be.
Yeah.
So then at the end, when there's suddenly this big ramped up escalation of that plot, and like the girl, the other, they're the two that killed Thingamajig. Well, why weren't you still tailing them? Why did you just go, oh, they've killed him. Oh, I'm just going to fuck off to Aspen and like not worry about it anymore. Would the guy not be annoyed about that? Like, what is happening? Like, so yeah, the structure and that sort of clever core conceit just falls apart.
It's not followed through on. That's the problem. I mean, so for me, I agree with you. There are multiple problems with the film. I think one is that the humor doesn't hold up. The second is that just structurally, it's just like it doesn't really do anything with its premise, which is a real shame. It's a lot of it's just a lot of excuses for them to dick about instead of actually like taking advantage of the premise. Because the premise of them accidentally getting out of situations through being stupid, and it just keeps, through pure coincidence, working, and all the criminals being like, these guys are like super geniuses. The best example of it in the film, I think, is the rat poison thing. That's actually the premise working correctly, isn't it? The guys trying to kill them with rat poison They play a prank on him, set off his stomach ulcer. They think that's his medicine. They give it to him, and it's rat poison. They end up killing the guy that was trying to kill them. That's a funny example of them being stupid and getting out of a situation and making it look like they're like professionals. So the other guys are going, "Who are these guys? They took out our dude. Like, you know, they must be professionals. You know, carry that through your whole movie."
Yeah, definitely.
Because the problem otherwise is like you just going, well, they're so obviously stupid. Why does anyone see them as a threat in the actual film? Because they only once really demonstrate it in a way where it looks like that. So those are the first two problems which you just hit on. But for me, there's a third one, which is that the movie has no message or heart or point at all to it. It's a bunch of people acting like arseholes for an hour and 47 excruciating minutes. And then nothing. Like, the main characters don't win. But that's fine. I don't mind that. But also, they don't learn anything. What's the message of this film, Chris? What's the point of this film?
Well, it's meant that what they're trying to make it is friendship, but you just don't buy it because they've not done enough.
No, because not only have they not done enough, Chris, the second to last thing that happens is that Lloyd says to kill Harry. I'll kill him then.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
And there's nothing after him just telling them to kill him.
But that's what I think
to
the movie
show those
wants
two
the
making
message
it
to
up.
be.
It's a horrible, nasty, cynical film.
Yeah, but that's what the movie wants the message to be.
Right.
But it just doesn't work because of
things like that.
because in that last scene they give it like that joke, which again is not awful. Like that joke sort of responds but you've you've sacrificed the point, because if you don't have that joke and it's just all about sacrifice and they apologize to each other and they're wrestling over who gets to sacrifice, like, sure, maybe then it comes across a bit more. But even well, you've got like the I think, like you say, it's people being horrible to each other, and again they try and, like, Mary says to her husband, "Come and meet the sweetest man I've ever known," and it's like, but he's not. And even your experience of him, you'd be running a fucking mile because you'd be scared shitless. You'd be like, this guy stalked me across the country, and yes, it's led me to you, but let's get the fuck out of here.
Because the guy's a lunatic, and I've shared about 8 minutes of screen time with him, less probably. So I don't even know where to start, because this is one that kind of like exhausted me. Like I found watching this exhausting. I don't know how else to explain it. Like it was not a pleasant viewing experience, and I don't even have you said before this started, you know, like, oh, I don't know if this will be a long one, and I kind of agree. I don't even have the energy to like pull it apart, like, because it's so broken top to bottom. So little works. I don't even know where to start with it.
So let's talk. Because I think we have pulled it apart. The problem is those no heart or point, wasted premise and structure, and humor either being too juvenile or like
just not
really
working.
Poor taste.
Those
are the three problems with it. We have pulled it apart.
The three pillars of why this movie sucks.
Yeah, and we can dig into some of them a little bit more. But here's a question for then, because I think we have picked it apart. It's just like those are the headlines. Why? Because this movie was not just a success with children. That's not the reason this movie is a success. So do you think it was also a success with adults because humor trends, fashions, whatever, were different back then, and in general the humor was a bit more juvenile? And I don't mean that in a snobby way. I really don't. Look, there is still, I'm not a comedy snob. There's still room for toilet humor. I'm not saying that Harry was
You're a fan of cock blockers.
Of cock blockers? What? Oh, cock blockers. Yeah, I'm absolutely.
I think it's just called blockers in the posters.
It's just called
marketing.
Blockers. Yeah. I think Blockers is a fun Sunday night movie to put on.
Right.
But
to be fair, Blockers is way better than this.
yeah, I was going to say, you enjoyed Blockers.
Blockers actually, even if the humour of Blockers hasn't / doesn't age well in 20 years' time, at least it has a point. Is it a particularly clever one? No, it's a pretty straightforward point about, parenting and stuff, but it's got one, and it's consistently pushed, and the characters make sense, and people learn things, and the plot makes sense.
Blockers is one of those things that because it's one of those scenarios where because Dan and I watch Blockers together, and it's one of those scenarios where if someone really doesn't particularly fancy a film, Dan, I think naturally the impression of the other person's impression of the film raises. So, I don't think Blockers is, the best film in the world. I was like, this is entertaining. Let's watch that. And then we're watching it, and Dan found it more entertaining than he thought he would. But I think equally, in your head afterwards, you were like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't incredible. And I'm like, fuck me, nobody said it was an incredible film.
Right.
I would never. And I think that happens sometimes when two people are in two different places about a movie. I assume you dislike it or didn't want to watch it more than you didn't want to watch it. You assume I loved it more than I loved it. Truth somewhere in the middle.
I was going to say the truth is somewhere in the middle because we both ended up coming out of it it turns out that both of us thought, that's good. It's fine.
Yeah, good film. So, I think maybe... And like I say, so let me be very clear. I'm not being snobby. Jeff Daniels getting the runs is funny. I don't think it's hilarious anymore, but it is. That's not necessarily. When I say juvenile, I'm not going jokes about diarrhea. The fact that the laxative is called Turbo Lax is amusing. It is. So it's not a snob. When I say juvenile, I don't mean that in a snobby way, but I do look at it and go, I get why we loved it, but why is this film such a classic? And do you think it is taste has changed? Humor's changed? I can't think of anything else it could be.
I'd like to bring up a little movie, Chris, from 2013 called Grown Ups 2. Now, Grown Ups 2 is an objectively bad movie, in my opinion.
Have you seen it?
I have. I've not.
I think it's awful.
What's funny is I've not seen Grown Ups 1, but I have seen Grown Ups 2. It was a Christmas or New Year's thing, family, quite a lot of people. How do you find a movie to please everyone? And my Uncle Colin, big love Uncle Colin, says, you know what? Let's just throw on Grown Ups 2. And I thought he was a lunatic. Because, Uncle Colin doesn't have bad taste. Uncle Colin watches a lot of very good things. I was surprised at his choice. But Uncle Colin understood the room. And Grown Ups 2 went down a fucking treat, mate.
I love a few things about that. I love that you've seen. I love that you're like, I didn't even see Grown Ups. Like that matters to the plot.
It doesn't. It really doesn't.
I like and this isn't this. I don't mean this in a judgy way at all, because it would be my go-to in an ideal world too. It's just I got the kind of family that refuses to do things like group films. I love that you all live quite far apart, so after just a day, it's right, well, we've got to watch something because we have nothing more to say to each other. That amuses me. But also because Grown Ups 2 kind of in a way has similar problems to this in that it is a series of set pieces. Grown Ups 2 doesn't have a plot. Grown Ups 2 is literally just Adam Sandler.
Well, it sort of all builds up to that big party thing at the end, doesn't it? It's all sort of set up for that, isn't it? Because isn't every set piece them getting things for the party?
Vaguely, I think. I struggle to remember, but I do remember because Grown Ups 1 isn't that bad. Grown Ups 1 is an Adam Sandler.
Couldn't tell you, mate.
Whatever that. What's that guy who was in King of Queens? That dude.
Wait, who are you thinking of?
I'm sure he was in King of Queens, wasn't he? Kevin James.
Oh, Kevin James. Yeah. Chris Rock and David Spade.
Yeah, so it's an Adam Sandler Kevin James movie. Grown Ups is fine, but Grown Ups 2 I did not enjoy. So what you're saying is that broad tastes actually.
I think in situations, I think there are situations when something dumb and silly can work for a crowd of more casual film fans. You and I are going to sit down and go, the plot doesn't make sense, and there's no heart to it. And what's the message in the end? Is it not undercut by Harry and having them nearly shoot Lloyd 2 minutes early, or sorry, having Harry, volunteer? No, sorry, having Lloyd volunteer to have Harry shot 2 minutes earlier. Does that undercut the message of their friendship? Imagine saying that to your family after everyone just sat down and watched it and laughed their way through it.
Yeah.
I just think that there is room, I guess, in the universe for junk food, and I think sometimes movies like this get a pass on the grounds that people find them funny at the time, and I do think it's at the time. I'm not sure if when I sat down with my family and watched Grown Ups 2, if the choice had been Dumb and Dumber, I'm not sure it would have held up. Even then, for that group, So I do think there's an element of it that is just humor evolving. But I also do think that there is an element of hyper-casual cinema. Like, just something that's really not a film, even. Like, it's just going to be a collection of, like, funny set pieces. The story will be paper-thin. The character will be paper-thin. But it's not really there for anything other than, to give you a couple of laughs. There's...
Can you...
And I don't... I think that makes this a bad movie, personally, but I think I can see how a casual audience might have liked it at the time. And because I was young, and I can't remember whether I watched it with my family or not when I first saw it, I might have done. We used to rent videos together as a group, as a unit. Sometimes it would be, we'd watch that. I think I watched Ace Ventura with my family. I remember that quite distinctly. Because that movie blew my fucking mind as a child. I remember looking around at the rest of my family like, are you guys seeing this? He just talked through his butt with his hands. I think it was like, this is comedy genius, but I don't remember if I necessarily did that with Dumb and Dumber. But if I had, I suspect the experience might have been somewhat like watching Grown Ups 2. There's something about that really strikes me as like sort of explaining this somehow, and I don't think I have an answer here because because on one hand I am saying this is objectively a bad movie, and in the past we've sort of said there's room for good brainless entertainment. We've said this multiple times on our TV podcast, and it's definitely come up here.
Definitely.
There are times when there's a thing that is kind of brainless, but it's still well put together enough. Whereas this isn't even that.
Because I'm trying to think of like comedies like this, broad comedies for the masses that I've really enjoyed, and they all, like, if I think of recent ones, like, I don't know, The Heat I really enjoyed. I think We're the Millers is fantastic. I think
We're the Millers is brilliant.
It's really good.
I think I watched that with you.
I think we might have done, yeah. 21 Jump Street, Games Night, and all of those do have a very clear heart to them. Mm-hmm. The only example I can think of, but I think it is trying to have a heart. The Hangover hasn't got as much of a message, but what The Hangover does have over Dumb and Dumber is The Hangover. I'm talking about the first one, makes its format and structure work for it really well. That format of essentially it's a mystery story, it commits to that premise way more than Dumb and Dumber commits to the accidental road trip being chased format.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if I can think of just an out and out hilarious film that isn't comedy that doesn't also have.
I was just curious. Give it a little Google. We're the Millers, only 49% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's better than 49%.
We're the Millers.
Critical consensus. We're the Millers squanders its potential with an uneven, lazily assembled story. You know what, reviewers, I disagree.
Yeah,
Look,
I really
do
disagree.
I think it's a masterpiece? No, but I tell you what, I do think the audience score is more accurate.
Which is what?
72%. It's about right, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's about a 7 out of 10. Really enjoyed it. Is it, is it going into my list of great cinematic triumphs? No,
of course not.
It's not supposed to. But I enjoy.
But what's funny about that is I think comedies that make it into the great triumphs and stuff are usually older. And I think this experience that we've had with Dumb and Dumber would happen with us watching a lot of older comedy films.
Well, I'm not.
I really do.
See, this is a very good question because I wonder about this, but it depend on the kind of humor. So, for example, a movie like About a Boy, I am 99% sure would still hold up.
Yeah, that's fair. I see what you're saying.
So is it just the more puerile ones that struggle? And it's worth noting, actually, I should have said this earlier. It's worth noting. We're being very harsh on this film, but I'm weirdly, and I didn't know who it was at the time. I've met Peter Farrelly, who directed this and wrote it with his brother, and he's a very nice man. So I just want to make it very clear he was that this is we're not getting at the Farrelly brothers for this film, because this film was obviously a huge hit at the time and clearly worked at the time for whatever reason. We're scratching our heads trying to figure that out now in a modern context. But no ill will towards any of the people that created this.
We loved it, and I still would call it a classic because it is a classic. But the reason the film was even chosen,
right,
was because we'd been discussing with Beetlejuice, does it hold up? And I think it was a really applicable question to this.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely the discussion that we're having. And that's not saying everyone didn't have good intent. That's not saying there's not a lot of nostalgia and love for it. And again, it's not saying there's not some great ideas. The core conceit is amazing. There is some genuinely funny jokes. It's just it doesn't, in our opinion, hold up in a modern viewing. And speaking of that, Dan, do you want to do your list of to humor? Because what I was surprised by is because I expect to some degree, because you watch a lot, because I was rewatching Community, my God, and they use the Piers character for it and present it as this is an old guy with old-fashioned views.
Right.
There's a lot in Community that I do not believe would even, despite that premise, would make it to television now. Not just the episode that got removed from Netflix and stuff, but I think there's a lot in it that you wouldn't get past a script editor now.
Yes and no, because at least with Community, there is that framing of, it's not just that it's Pierce saying it, the other characters actively acknowledge he's wrong and offensive. Yeah. This movie...
No, but this is the thing. So can I just finish my... So I think when you watch older stuff with this kind of frame of, is the humour outdated, is it offensive, there's two camps, right? There's the camp of something like some of Community, although as you said and as I said, the framing makes a difference. But there's other stuff as well. Like there's a lot of stuff in Only Fools and Horses and shows like that where you go, there was no malicious intent here, and actually it's literally just that we recognise different things as offensive now that weren't recognised then, or there were colloquialisms or the way people talked about things then that are offensive now that, it wasn't the case then. Like, there's that kind of camp of, this is literally outdated. And then there's the camp of, I don't understand how this was even made at the time. Our big go-to example for that is Little Britain. Neither Dan or I can fathom how that was allowed to air on television, because even at the time, it was so obviously offensive and wrong. And I was expecting this film going in to fall into the first category of outdated. But there's quite a bit in this film that I'm like, I don't understand how this was... I don't understand how this got on screen even then. This is just mean, vindictive and offensive, and would have been even then.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, I do think framing is really, really, really important, because I think if you're putting an offensive thing, I think even now it's absolutely fine to put an offensive thing in a show or movie if the point is...
Oh, completely.
If the point is this is a bad character, and the other point is we're saying this is a shitty thing to say. Like, so for example, this is a weird example to pull because it's just the first thing that came to my brain. The Doctor Who episode Rosa has a person in it, a character in it, who is basically a future Nazi, basically. It's a time-traveling racist. And he has a bunch of very politically incorrect views. That's the point of the character, though. The point of the character is he is a clearly evil, incorrect person that has this viewpoint, and the show's purpose for having him say things is to show that they are wrong. So, and I think often, I even think actually I'd have to go back through it. I went back through it last year. I suspect with the Community example, they get away with it now, even as a result of that framing, because Pierce is clearly often the bad guy.
Because also, and that is how you do it. Yeah, because it is that Ricky Gervais thing. Although I think Ricky Gervais, as we've discussed before on MBS, I think not this, is doing it. Is saying that, but that's not actually what they're doing, and that for me makes a difference. In Community, the joke genuinely is Piers. And isn't he stupid? Hasn't he got outdated views? When it doesn't work, and what I think Ricky Gervais does a lot, is presents it as that and says that's what it is, but the laughs are actually coming from the offensive thing being said. It's not coming from a place of, oh, isn't he silly for thinking it's that, because that is the defense, but not actually how it's presented. Because if it's one man on stage, how can it be presented like that? As I've said before, what annoys me with Ricky Gervais is that's his defense. That's not why the audience are laughing. If you go on and tell a fat joke about Melissa McCarthy, your audience is not going, "Oh, look at Ricky Gervais with his thinking he can say those things about Melissa McCarthy. Isn't he old-fashioned?" They're laughing at the joke, which is wrong. In Community, you're not laughing at what Piers is saying. You're laughing at You're laughing at the fact that he said it. So yeah, I do think Community gets away with it. There was an episode we watched yesterday where there were just a few examples where I was like, I'm not sure that would air now, but I completely agree that in general, Community holds up because that's what makes the difference. And I think the intent is
I, with that in mind. The problem with this movie is it's called Dumb and Dumber. If only the lead two characters were doing that, and here's another important part, the characters around them were reacting to some of the things they were doing and saying as if that is incorrect, then the movie is selling me on the idea of, well, we know these guys are wrong. Yeah. But the movie doesn't present them that way. The movie presents... It does come out of the mouth of the two characters who are supposed to be dumb, but the movie then doesn't punish them for it, doesn't acknowledge the incorrectness of it. And I think... so the casual misogyny and homophobia, I think, unfortunately, I wouldn't be shocked to discover was just acceptable at the time, if I'm honest. But because the reason it doesn't hold up is because the movie, it has a perfect excuse. These are dumb people; they're wrong more often than not. But because it never actually, hangs a hat on that specifically, it just comes across as that's the movie's opinion. Because none of the characters ever acknowledge that isn't right, and specifically, if anyone's wondering what we're referring to, if you haven't seen the movie, for a start, there's just a lot of calling each other like woman and pussy, and there's a lot of like laughing at someone or accusing someone of being gay. Like that would be a problem. Like that would be somehow a bad thing. There's just a lot of weird framing like that. There's a scene.
I don't remember anyone calling someone else I hate that word, the P word. Do they?
Multiple times.
God.
It happens, I believe. I want to say 3 times.
Is it the villains then? I'm thinking of Harry and Lloyd saying it to each other, but the villains say it to each other.
No. Lloyd calls Harry homo, pussy, and woman in the space of maybe, I want to say 6 minutes. I wrote it down. It's like a sequence. Yeah. It happens multiple times. One of the times it happens is just over the bloody over the peppers. It's just very casually layered in. Like it's you. I absolutely understand how someone might miss it, but my ears pricked up.
Yeah.
It's a really unfortunate thing that this movie has. But I will say, you said earlier, I'm not sure any of this would have been acceptable even at the time. Looking back at it with that sentence in mind, I'm actually not 100% sure I agree with that, because I think all of that probably would have been fine at the time. I can't think of anything that even at the time would have been problematic. It's not like, at no point in the movie do they black up like Little Britain. Little Britain's like a good 10, 15 years after this. So, it's Little Britain is a really strong example of I don't know how this happened even at the time. Dumb and Dumber, I think, the casual homophobia, misogyny, and the idea that somehow having womanly traits was was just automatically inherently a bad thing. Feminine traits of some sort, like it's just that's automatically not good. That stuff I suspect would have been in a lot of movies at the time. It's not great. I mean, the other problem as well you've got is so you've got all the casual homophobia, but then the misogyny, it's not just aimed at each other as well. It's how they then treat women. Like, there are many scenes of them, like, coveting women, but in a really inappropriate way. Like, look at the ass on that, and that sort of stuff. And that stuff, again, I think probably would have been passable at the time, because I'm remembering a world where, Kevin and Perry Go Large exists, and I'm pretty sure there are many jokes in that movie where they get visible erections. And,
it's the whole movie,
right? Yeah, okay, yeah. I think it is. That's the only gag I remember from that movie is these comedic like erections they give the characters, where they put some sort of animatronic prosthetic in their trousers, so in the movie comedically this thing rises from there. Yeah, I remember that visual, and that's pretty much the only thing I remember from Kevin and Perry Go Large.
But Dan, there's a scene in Kevin and Perry Go Large where the bank they're in is getting robbed, and then the cashier has to bend down and pick up some money, and her cleavage gives them such a large erection, they accidentally sound the emergency button underneath the desks, and the police come and they save everyone. So,
Not to be messed around with, kids. Erections can save lives.
Not mine.
So with that in mind, it's just an interesting thing to examine that statement, because I found that really interesting that you thought that even at the time some of this wouldn't be. But the more I think about it, the more I go, I'm not sure that is true. Actually, I think a lot of this would have been passable at the time. Was there anything particular you had in mind?
The scene where he's spoofing martial arts and making noises, and that he is not far. Just the impersonations in that scene and stuff.
Yeah, he's doing a Bruce Lee bit.
Yeah, and maybe that would have been, well, it clearly was acceptable at the time, but that for me was that, and the treatment of women were some of the worst.
There's a bit where they lift up someone's skirt to have a look. That might actually be in that sequence too. Actually, that dream sequence. But again, you look at something like Wayne's World, which I suspect holds up a lot better than this movie. In fact, I would put money on it. I think you know, they have moments as well where it's like. So I had a specific. Oh yeah, so with the Bruce Lee thing, there's a moment in Wayne's World or Wayne's World 2 where they spoof a martial arts movie and they do the bad dubbing thing. Where his mouth is talking, but it's out of sync with what you're hearing because it's been dubbed over, like an old like an old karate movie, basically.
Well, I mean, least we forget, How I Met Your Mother thought it would be okay to spoof karate films and put yellow makeup on people. So yeah.
Oh yeah, God. So yeah, so I think so again. I at the time that was apparently fine. I don't know. It's,
right, Dan,
there's a lot of very
wrong.
problematic stuff, but I think that might very well be just a result of its age. At the time, I think we weren't as aware of these things as a society, and it's a shame because, I mean, the movie doesn't work anyway. You take those out, this is still a bad movie.
Well, so what? Because we have been quite critical, Dan. But I've named some jokes I liked. I feel like I want a couple of positive things from you about this movie, Dan.
I do like. I like the opening sequence with the dogs. I think that's funny. Like when he's offering the dogs the food, but he's just had them clipped and cleaned, and the idea that he thought it was a good idea to go get them fast food, drives them around.
Well, what I like about that is that the funny thing about that is also that the dogs, they've got these really specific orders that the dogs all know. It's just like, what?
Yeah. And then my other favourite joke is a really subtle one, and it's when the two criminals go into their apartment. And we're going to have to send them a message. Let's trash the place. And the other one just goes, I don't think they're going to get that message, Joe.
Yeah.
They've
got worms in their living room.
It's the way she delivers it as well. I don't know who that actress is, but she's very good in this movie.
She was good.
I don't think they're gonna get this. I don't think they're gonna get that message, Joe. It's just the way she does it. I literally rewound it and watched it again because it's such an understated delivery. I do think Jeff Daniels is masterful in this film. I think Jim Carrey had a bit of a battle getting Jeff Daniels into this movie, which we'll come to when we get to trivia. But Jim Carrey was convinced having a legit actor do the other role would ground the movie a lot better than two comedic people overacting, essentially. He didn't say that, but and he was exactly right. You need someone to go big and someone to keep it small, and make a lot of sort of more subtle choices, and that really does work. So Jeff Daniels is another thing that I absolutely loved about this movie. As you said, I think the premise is very clever, but I think there are moments where it's executed well, and I think I've already complimented, but the sequence with the rat poison is when this movie is working at its best, I think, because I think that's when it's playing into that premise of creating the impression these two are like genius hitmen working for some other party involved in this situation, when it's just these two idiots bumbling through the situation. I think that's what the movie should have done more of, to be honest with you.
Another thing they could have done with that is there was a really obvious joke hanging there, which is after he swapped the van for the bike, which again I think is very funny, that sort of reveal. Show the guy who brought the van,
right,
getting arrested, and being like, what the fuck? I've only had this thing 2 minutes. And then being like, oh, that was so clever. They got rid of the van.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just about to make that exact point. Yeah, they could have been like, these guys are geniuses. They've swapped vehicles, it's and then and I will say as well, credit to, and I think I've got to give the credit here to Jim Carrey, because it will come to it in trivia, but the ending they wanted is different to the ending that happened. Only in a small way, but it's a very, very big way. The choice to end this movie with them not getting a win is brilliant. It's genius. The choice that for those who don't remember, the ending of the movie, they're like, wow, after all of that, we're no better off. We don't have the van anymore. We've got no money. We're just sort of literally walking back home after, from Aspen, all these miles. This is going to be rough. We're going to have to hitchhike, basically. Why can't we get a break? And then this bus pulls up, and these girls get out, and they're like, hi, we're a bikini tour, and we're looking for two oil boys to oil us up and tour around the country for the next few months. And they're like, well, you're in luck. There's a town like 2 miles that way. You will definitely find someone there. And then they go,
Again.
and then they hit the extra gag of they go, oh, what have you realized what you've done? They chase after the bus, bang on the thing, it opens, and they're like, actually, sorry, the town is that way. That ending, the original
Well,
intent.
for me, again, it's the, like you said earlier, it's the add-on that makes that funnier. It's as
Right.
the bus is driving away and they're like, man, 2 lucky guys are going to have the time of their life.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
like-
It's great. And that's brilliant. That's a perfect ending for this movie. The original intention was that they'd get on that bus.
Oh, yeah, no, that isn't as funny.
It's not. Well, not only is it not as funny, but it makes the whole movie worse. Like the whole like idea for me, like they shouldn't get a win. There's no win for these characters in this. Yeah, I
they're
don't
such
know.
bad people.
So yeah, so the choice they made to give those characters like that ending is absolutely genius. It's both funny and it suits. I'm trying to think of other stuff I liked. I thought the
You've done quite
scenes
a bit
with
there.
Harry and Mary were funny, mostly. The way she was kind of
Yeah.
amused by him, but he was like almost accidentally charming. They were kind of reasonably well written, I think.
They were quite well written. It falls apart again when you think that she's got a kidnapped husband. But
Yeah,
yes,
they
I
try to
agree.
cover it by having the parents earlier in the movie be like, you need to be seen about town, skiing and going to these events. So it's kind of like, oh, she's using Harry as an excuse for that. Like,
Yeah.
So, but it's still, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. The another compliment just came to my brain and then is immediately vanished. That was weird. Oh wow!
Was it Turbo Lax? Turbo Lax is objectively funny.
It wasn't Turbo Lax. No.
It is though because it's a comedic name for a laxative.
I
Like,
know. I'm not
it-
disagreeing with that. I'm saying like it wasn't the thing I was thinking of. it's
Oh, right.
What was it? I had another compliment for the movie, but it's gone. It was something to do with. It was something spin off from the Harry situation.
The old lady just smiling as you know she's going to steal all Lloyd's shit was quite funny.
Oh yeah. That's a good part. That's a reasonably funny moment. I'm trying to think. What was it? I mean, well, it was something to do with. It was something to do with the Harry and Mary situation, but it's gone. Oh well, if it was that important, I'll remember it later. Yeah. So I did. Go on.
I didn't like. I will say as well. This is. Have you got your? Have you got a bottle of water with you, Dan?
I've got some. I've got glass. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, drink up because you might not get a drink for a minute or two because we're going to nitpick corner.
Oh.
Now, obviously, this is a consistent thing for me with a lot of things, not just this film. But this film doesn't need fantasy sequences. None of them were particularly funny. None of them particularly added anything to the plot. And it just really obvious, oh, you think that's happened, but it hasn't. It's a fantasy. No, I didn't think he'd actually shot the guy. Like, I just don't think for me, and maybe it's my bias against fantasy sequences, but I don't think any of them worked.
No, I don't think they do either. Because I think a good fantasy sequence tells you something new and interesting about the character.
Exactly.
At least. What the fantasy sequence in this case tells us is that Lloyd doesn't care for the husband of the lady he's been after, which we already know.
very much know. Yeah.
Which we very much already know. The other fantasy sequence, which I think is a bit more passable, because I think it gives us an insight into what he's hoping will happen when he gets to Aspen to start with. But then it devolves into like, why am I watching this? But I like I don't mind the part of it when it's him with her family, and he's like, Bella the Ball sort of thing. Like he showed up out of nowhere. That he's brought back her suitcase. She loves him. She introduced him to his family. They're all sat around the fire. And he's cracking jokes. Like that one's okay because that gives us like some insight into what his goal is with all of this.
Yeah, well, more than that, I think that's funnier in places as well because the humor of that one comes to me with the fact that it's amusing to see a guy where in his fantasy everyone's reacting like it's highbrow great humor, but he's like lighting his farts, and just
Right.
the idea,
Yes.
just the notion that that's how he thinks people entertain each other.
So that part
is
of
amusing.
that one is good, but then that one devolves into the big fight scene, which I don't necessarily like. In of itself, I don't hate, but in this movie, it doesn't really do it. It's not. I don't know what it's there for. And this is the problem. It's like I'm in the past we've had this. It's come up a bunch of times. I'm less adverse to fantasy sequences than you are, because I don't mind an excuse to like learn something about the character. But when it just doesn't add anything to anything, that's when I go like, well, I don't know what you're even. Why am I watching this? Like, unless it's deeply entertaining in of itself, which this one isn't. I don't know.
Should we triv it up, Dan?
Well, before we triv it up, I've got a little list, Chris, and it's called "Lloyd is the villain of this movie."
Okay.
So first of all, Skeezy uses the limo to pick up chicks, and just generally demonstrates leery things. 2, sells a dead bird to a blind kid.
Yeah, it's not good.
3, throws Harry under the bus for the salt thing. When Harry throws the salt and it hits the dude in the head, when the guy comes to find out who threw it, there's no reason that he would have suspected those two specifically, but Lloyd's pointing at Harry because he's a dick. Obviously, this is where I wrote down about the casual homophobia and misogyny. Calls Harry homo, pussy woman. We covered that. Next, slept with the love of Harry's life. Swapped the van for the bike. Obviously terrible choice. Bad person. Chooses to spend all of Mary's money. Now, they very specifically have Harry be the one who rationalizes spending that money. Now, I will say on this one, there is also a compliment baked into it, because I actually think that joke at the end, that the case is full of IOUs, is good.
The payoff of that, and what's amazing about that is, that's beautifully executed, because they slip in at the very beginning. Oh, well, we'll leave. I think Lloyd says that. Oh, Harry says that. We'll pay it all back with IOUs. And then we literally watch them spend all the money, and yet it still functions as like because I guess they make you forget about it, or maybe they show them spending the money so much, or the way they spend it is so outlandish you forget. But that joke and payoff of the money not being there and instead it being IOUs is great. That is a great gag.
Yeah,
and the execution of that bit is very good.
Yes, but again, it makes Lloyd the villain of the movie. He spends all of the money, as well as selling the dead bird and the salt thing and all the other stuff. And then the final thing on the Lloyd is the villain of this movie is, of course, okay, kill him, when he tells the criminal who has a gun to kill his supposedly best friend. Lloyd is the villain of the movie. I thank you.
There you go.
He is. He's the villain. He's the bad guy. Should we do some triv then, Chris? Because I want to stop.
Let's triv it up.
I want to stop talking about this movie.
What you got trivia? Have you got trivia about Back to the Future? I think we're going to keep talking about the movie.
Yeah. Well, but it means we're getting towards the end. That's the fair enough. Okay, so an early draft of this film had Mary's husband revealed to be literally Mel Gibson playing himself.
I think that's funny.
At the time, Gibson was one of Hollywood's biggest heartthrobs, so the idea that Lloyd would have to match up to Mel Gibson, obviously that's funny.
Why didn't they do that? That's a good joke.
It is a good joke, and I get maybe they couldn't get Mel Gibson, or maybe they changed their minds last minute. I don't know. Maybe they just thought it would distract from the fantasy scene where he shoots it. I don't know what the thinking was. So that's one of the early adjustments to the script that was made. Some alternate endings.
I like that a lot.
Some alternate endings they had during the scripting stage. The first was that Lloyd and Harry turned down the opportunity to work the hotel at the hotel to pay off some of their as bellhops on a sort of part-time basis. There's an alternate ending that they had on screens on script. I don't think anything was ever shot, where he actually, instead of offering them to work as bellhops, offered them a job babysitting his grandson, who by coincidence turned out to be Billy from 4C, the blind child that Lloyd had sold a dead bird to earlier in the movie.
Oh. But that's odd, because they don't... The bad guys that the money was being given to got arrested.
Yes.
She got her husband back, so she wouldn't particularly be after the money. And everyone else, they paid with cash. Like, to my mind, they don't particularly owe anyone any money.
No, yeah, exactly. I think like it seems like Mary's family are rich enough that they don't care. In the end, it worked out. They got him back. Like, they're not going to chase after that funds. But I guess that there's an impulse when you're writing this script to sort of cover that and go, well, they did spend a lot of someone else's money here. How do we justify it? And correctly, I think, in the drafting process, at some point they went, actually, we'll just assume that Mary doesn't care about the money because she got her husband back.
The main where are the repercussions moment for me was when they, in kind of two different ways, very publicly kill a man. I was like, where's the scene where, like, the police question them, or everyone else in that cafe go, well, they gave him the peppers and were laughing at it, and then they gave him pills and the guy died. Like, where's the getting out of that situation?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Questions. Anyway, let's do some alternate casting. Do you want to hear some of the other options? So there's quite a lot of them, but I'll go through as quick as I can. And so they're all in different, like, they're all phrased differently. So some of them are like, this person turned down it, this person was considered for it, this person actually auditioned. So we'll go through them. So Nicolas Cage and Gary Oldman were the original choices the producers and writers wanted for Harry and Lloyd.
Mm-hmm. That'd have been different.
Yeah, very different. Nicolas Cage and Gary Oldman. Yeah. Then they moved on and they were looking for Eddie Murphy and Mike Myers.
That'd have been fine.
Oh, actually, funnily enough, Eddie Murphy and Mike Myers were both considered for Lloyd. Oh no, they wouldn't have been in it together. Interesting. Steve Martin and Martin Short both turned down the role of Lloyd. So, there you go. Rob Lowe auditioned to play Harry. And
he could have done it. That would have been good, I reckon.
Yeah. I don't think necessarily as good as Jeff Daniels. I think Jeff Daniels is brilliant in this film, but yeah. I don't
think anyone would have been as good as Jeff Daniels. No.
And then finally, two more. Three more. So Chris Elliott and Chris Farley were briefly considered for the role of Harry. Chris Farley would have been good. Ben Stiller turned down the role of Lloyd. And then finally, at one point, the Farrelly brothers considered Corey Feldman and Corey Haim for Harry and Lloyd, but New Line Cinema CEO Robert Shea wouldn't allow it as he felt the Coreys were no longer bankable actors.
Wow. I think the problem with a lot of those casting choices, I know it sounds so stupid, but they're quite different physically. Like hairstyles, like the size-wise, they're not that different. But there's something about them as a duo that really works in part. And I think that especially in physical comedy, I think that kind of thing is actually more important than it should be. And I think just the notion of like Ben Stiller and Jim Carrey, like I just think they're too close in a way. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm glad. This is the perfect casting for this movie.
Yeah, none of those other options really work for me. Again, with Rick and Morty Portal Gun, maybe I wouldn't. It wouldn't be the first thing on my list, but seeing a dimension where one of those castings happened out of curiosity might be something I would do. But
yeah, but again, as always, you choose that like the Corey and Corey one is the one everyone's watching in that scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Yeah. And I might even not watch the whole film. I might just go to that dimension, find the trailer, and then I'm out. Unless the trailer blows my mind. So Jim Carrey was originally just offered $700,000 to appear in the film, which I say just. The reason I say just is because the offer went in the same week in February 1994 as Ace Ventura: Pet Detective came out, and then opened at number 1 in the box office. By the time Carey's agents had then renegotiated with the film's producers, his salary had gone up from $700,000 to $7 million. And I will point out as well that that is almost half of the film's budget. It reportedly had a somewhere around $18 million budget, which...
Hey, how...
Go on.
Yeah. How quickly did they turn that film round then?
Very quickly. It came out in December. So they were negotiating with actors in February, and the movie came out December. I looked it up because I had that exact same question. Yeah. So February '94, and then the movie out in this movie out in I think it was December. I want to say December 14th. Didn't come out in the UK until like August the next year, or April the next year. But yeah, in America there was 8-9 months, which is, I guess, for a comedy without a lot of special effects, that actually probably is about right. Obviously, if it had been like a movie with a much bigger like special effects budget and needs or whatever, then it would have been different. But it was actually, I mean, look, they made it for I think $17-18 million, and like it grossed I think $250 million, something in that region. So
wow,
like, you know, it was a pretty low budget movie that ended up paying off in quite a big way. It doesn't surprise me to know that seeing that they made 2 further sequels. You know, so Jim Carrey actually has got a chipped tooth, and he has a cap that unchips it, and he had that removed for the movie because he thought it would make the character look more deranged.
Yeah, but it does work. Yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't know how you would do that without like extensive special effects, other than I guess a prosthetic on top of your existing teeth. But then that would stick out more. So I don't know. Yeah, it's just one of those things. According to the Farrelly brothers, Jeff Daniels was not wanted for the film by the studio. In fact, in order to ensure a no from him, the studio only offered him $50,000 for the role. He accepted this without hesitation, nor did he attempt to negotiate because he wanted to do the movie. Daniels later claimed that 3 of his agents called him the night before the costume fitting, begging him not to go, saying they would get him out of his contract, told him that in no uncertain terms he was making the worst mistake of his career, and that it would destroy his reputation as a serious actor. They said that basically they were implying that Jim Carrey would receive all the credit for the movie's comedy, and then he would get sort of panned as being like sort of the side to that. But Daniels apparently told them that his decision was final and that it was his mistake to make, and went and shot the movie. But apparently the studio was still so against him being in the movie, they didn't actually let him shoot any scenes with Jim Carrey for the first week of production because they were fully prepared to replace him in the role. They had a comedian on standby waiting to take the role over, and just shot scenes shot scenes of him on his own, so that they could be easily removed should they need to be. However, after viewing the dailies and the constant insistence from Jim Carrey that a real actor, as opposed to a comedian playing opposite him, would ground the film, with all that combined, the studio eventually allowed Daniels to keep the role. But what a fucking journey.
What you're saying is, and it is, I think probably Jim Carrey has slightly more screen time, especially at the beginning, but that's probably outweighed by the Harry and Meghan stuff later. But it is very much the two of them. This film has
I love
two
that you just
leads.
said Harry and Meghan.
Sorry, Harry and whatever her name is. What's her name?
Mary. But I just obviously you went straight to Meghan because Harry and Meghan.
Harry and Mary. But so what that means is, just to clarify, the situation here.
Yes.
Jim Carrey got paid $7 million.
Correct.
For this movie in which he's one of the 2 leads.
Yes.
And Jeff Daniels, the other lead, got $50,000.
Yeah. He got $50,000.
Fucking hell.
He got $50,000 plus being forced to only shoot stuff on his own because they were determined to replace him. And his agents badgering him not to do it.
I think this gave him way more options as an actor. But 101 Dalmatians was the next year. Looking at this, Pleasantville, I think, is a comedy, isn't it? Maybe. So fair enough.
Yeah, but I do think to a point though, this trivia presents it as, and they were so wrong. Let's be fair, his serious acting career definitely took a while to recover.
Yeah, well, I think it took, the newsroom, really.
Yeah, so they weren't completely wrong.
Yeah,
he took the movie for 50,000, and I think in the end it did potentially hurt him. But hey, what do I know?
Nuts. Like, he'd done Speed at that point. Like, he was fairly well known. Oh wow!
Yeah,
cool. Right.
So I kind of think his agents might have been right, but hey ho.
Yeah.
The hotel bar and Lamborghini scenes were all shot at the historical Stanley Hotel, which is actually the inspiration for The Shining, basically. The landing we landed on the moon photo in the bar is still literally on the wall. That's genuinely a thing.
That made me laugh as well.
Whoa! Well,
we landed on the moon.
So that's a little bit further down in the trip, but I'll bring up now, because it's come up here. He improvised that line.
Oh, that's good. It's a good line.
They just didn't. It wasn't in the script. He just did it on the spot while they were shooting. So while they were filming at that hotel, Jim Carrey wanted to stay at the hotel and requested the infamous room 217, which is obviously a reference to The Shining. And according to a tour guide at the hotel, now I think this is very spurious, but we'll go with it. According to a tour guide at the hotel, after about 3 hours, after 3 hours after Carrey went to sleep, he came running out of the room and left the hotel. And to this day, vows never to go back and will not tell anybody why. I think that's horseshit.
Yeah, because, to be fair, Dan, you might be right, because Jim Carrey is quite a level-headed character these days, isn't he? So there's no signs that anything could have in any way affected his thinking.
Let's cover quickly why I think that's horseshit. Point one. Point one, it's come from a tour guide at the hotel who's very vested in making that story spookier than it is. Two, if that tour guide has the story that Jim Carrey left in the middle of the night, how does he know he refuses to talk about it to this day? Does he know Jim Carrey? Does he meet Jim Carrey regularly? Does Jim Carrey pop by all the time and go, "Don't take me in that room"? It'd be a weird thing for him to know.
It's one of those things where Jim Carrey's hanging around outside the hotel and strangers are passing him and he's like, "What's that? Will I go inside?" "No, I won't."
Be a weird thing for a person to know. Smells of bullshit to me. There's too much incentive for that person to have a good story, and there's too little logic to it. I don't doubt there's a chance that Jim Carrey stayed in that room and didn't like it, got weird vibes, maybe left early, checked out early or something. That part maybe, but I think the rest is apocryphal, sort of like it helps us sell our hotel. Anyway, when Harry and Lloyd are in the car, Lloyd asks Harry if he wants to hear the most annoying sound in the world. If you watch Jeff Daniels' face, you can clearly discover that was an ad-libbed moment, and that has been confirmed since. But yeah, it's very obvious. I rewatched it after reading that trivia, and Jeff Daniels loses it. They cut away just as he's losing it, but it's clear that the choice of shots has to be dictated there because of Jeff Daniels' face. Like, if you go through it like frame by frame, he's done.
I've just discovered, Dan, in going to look at it, look at that scene again. We did this at the right time, my friend. Leaves Prime in 10 days.
Leaves Prime in 10 days.
Yep. Blimey.
We did do it at the right time. We got to watch it for free. If we'd have done this a week or two
so
from
if you
now,
want to, if you want to watch it again, Dan, you've only got 10 days to do it.
Or I'll have to pay the £3.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is an option.
After scamming Seabass to pay for their bill, Lloyd says he saw it in a movie. The movie he's referencing is a film called Something Wild, and the guy who pulls that scam is played by Jeff Daniels.
Oh, that's good. That's
I like
very
that
good.
one. Yeah, we'll call this section subtle things about the movie. During the men's room stall scene, when Lloyd checks the time, a close-up of his wristwatch reveals it's a casino alarm chronograph instead of a Casio, revealing it to be a fake watch. It's also lacking any of the dials that you'd get on a real Casio watch, but also it's missing the numbers 5, 6, and 7 for no obvious reason.
That's great.
That is fun.
Oh wow! I mean, Jeff Daniels full on corpses.
Right, his face just like blows up. Right, he like actually is like
Yeah, like, and I mean, I think it's in you. It doesn't look out of place for the character, but when you know, it's full on.
yeah. When I watched it back, I was surprised how much Jeff Daniels like breaks there. It's quite that clearly tickled him. I mean, it's a kind of funny moment. It's especially if if it wasn't in the script, it just came out of nowhere. Jim Carrey, you are hearing the most annoying noise in the world. Anyway, Jim Carrey refused to shoot an ending where Harry and Lloyd get on the bus with the Hawaiian Tropic Bikini Girls, which is why they sort of adjusted it and ended up having that, which I've already stated, better ending, where they are not rewarded for being terrible people and instead continue to have bad luck. Jeff Daniels told a story where he was on a golf course one day and Clint Eastwood told him that he'd just seen the movie. Daniels apparently braced himself for a negative reaction, but to his surprise, Eastwood wanted to tell Daniels that the bathroom scene had happened to him once when he was on a date. I assume what he means by that is he went to use the toilet, found out it was broken after he'd used it, not the laxative stuff.
But he was going to Aspen to return a bag, and not the entire movie.
I just have to assume that's that's what that means.
We never see him get out of that situation, do we? Because she goes off with. We never see the conclusion.
A little. He picks up he detaches the entire toilet bowl and pours it out the window. Which I did think, how has he done that so quickly without any damage to the plastering? But Also, why isn't all the water falling out the pipe at the back?
Yeah, well, because the
water
toilet's not working.
Poop. No, because he's picked up the bowl that's full of the water. The cistern's not sending water into the bowl, but the bowl is full of water and his poop, presumably.
Probably just his poop, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well, you don't think there's any water in the bowl? So did he not see that? I guess he jumps on it quickly because he had the laxative. But still, it makes a sloshing sound when he picks it up.
It's called Dumb and Dumber, Dan. I don't think we should be poking. I mean, most people would look in the bowl and see there was no toilet before they had their turbo shits.
Also, it makes a lot of sloshy sounds when he pours it, like it has water mixed in. But I guess that could just be how laxed he is.
It could just be the
but yeah, but even that then would be coming out if it's watery. Would be coming out the big pipe at the back of the toilet when he picks up the bowl.
Yes, unless the pipe is blocked off in some way. But yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a good point.
He doesn't. Yeah, unless he's secretly a plumber. I don't know how that happened so neatly. Anyway, and so quickly. But yeah, so apparently, Clint Eastwood thought that because it, didn't have a negative thing to say. He found that relatable. The last piece of sort of traditional trivia before we get to my world famous segment, Cars Exist. Just a weird one, and I found this really interesting. Apparently, in March 2006, Dumb and Dumber was accidentally broadcast completely uncensored on Cartoon Network.
Sorry for that noise. How and why?
I suspect there was a heavily edited version that they were prepared to air.
Right, okay.
But instead, they broadcast the full original movie, including the inappropriate stuff. And I think most notably here, the thing that seems to have gotten feedback was obviously there's the point when Jim Carrey lifts up the girl's skirt and reveals her entire backside.
In my In my head, Cartoon Network is just only ever cartoons. So that's why I laughed so hard at that, because I thought it became like in the UK when I was a kid, it became like Paramount when it aired. So it was only cartoons.
Right.
So in my head, like in the middle of the day after
Ren and
Steven
Stimpy.
Universe
Yeah.
and the Jetsons, like they just played Dumb and Dumber at 2 p.m.
It sounds like they might have played it quite early if the original intention was to do a thing. But yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Okay, so Chris, it's time for my world famous segment. Cars exist. Wow, 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 wow. The
Whoop whoop. Oh, sorry, I feel like I didn't give you as much as you wanted there. Carry on.
That's fine, Chris. It's a give and take relationship, but today it's mostly give from me.
God, cars exist. Whoop whoop. Honk honk.
What is that a clown nose? Honk honk. Anyway,
It's a car.
I appreciate it, buddy. I appreciate your effort. I do.
Yeah.
This is quite a long Cars Exist, because it turns out there are quite a lot of cars in this movie. The dog truck that Harry and Lloyd drive is a 1984 Ford Econoline. Econoline? Econoline. I'm going to go with that. The limousine that Lloyd's drive, the limousine that only people called Lloyd can drive was a 1987 Cadillac Brougham. Good to know. The car that Shay and Mental drive, is that the name of those characters? Who knows? Was a 1982 Lincoln Town car, Chris. You might be excited to hear. The sports car Harry and Lloyd purchase is a Lamborghini Diablo. And finally, the undercover FBI agent Beth Jordan's car is a 1994 Jeep Cherokee Sport. But if you think it ends there, Chris, I've got another bit for you, mate. Oh, yeah, that's
No,
right.
I did.
Doubling down with a spin-off segment, Bikes Exist.
Yes. Yes, bikes exist.
The State Trooper's motorcycle was a Harley-Davidson FXRT Sports Glide, and the mini bike that Lloyd and Harry ride all the way to Aspen is something called a Taco 22, which I did enjoy discovering. So,
Wow.
we're there. We made it. That was tough to watch and talk about, if I'm being honest with you, Chris.
Super quick thing. I will say one thing I forgot to mention.
Sure.
King of the Small Parts, Fred Stoller is very good as the man on waiting outside the phone.
Was that Fred? Was that Fred Stoller?
Yeah, it's Fred Stoller just mumbling to himself, and then he gets punched. And
Yeah, of course it was Fred
funny.
Stoller. I can hear his voice in my head. Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually that scene in general I think works really well. For those who remember, he's sort of like he's trying to get on the phone. He's like ranting to himself. He doesn't realize the guy that he's getting angry at for using the phone too long is a criminal that'd be quite willing to incite violence, and it plays out as you might expect. But yeah, you're right. It's a great role. Yeah, it's funny. So I guess you're thinking, Chris, what next? Now
I am very much thinking that, Dan. What is next?
Well, I had a choice, but I've thrown it away.
Throw it out.
I threw it out.
Get rid of it.
I threw it out. Put it in a little back pocket for another time. Because I made a bold statement during this podcast, and I want to find out if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I think Wayne's World will hold up better.
You also said you didn't think Grown Ups 2 would. So it's between the two.
I'm going to go with Wayne's World. Wayne's World
Cool.
is a movie from my youth that I have very fond memories of. The last time I think I watched this will have been uni-ish, which might line up with Dumb and Dumber. I genuinely don't remember the last time I watched Dumb and Dumber, to be fair. But it might line up with that. I feel like it's a couple of years younger, but again from an era with this sort of like slightly more puerile comedy but I suspect Wayne's World functions better. Now, I don't know. Have you seen Wayne's World? I'm not sure you have. I don't know.
I think I saw Wayne's World once at uni and fell asleep. Not necessarily because of the quality of the film, but because of the tired state I was in at the time. It was one of those sort of hangover days.
Oh yeah,
watching Wayne's World things.
Oh,
so
yeah. I had many of those.
I think
the amount of lectures that I think I actually slept sitting up with my eyes open through. It's not good. Yeah, so
although there was that one time I legitimately fell asleep in a lecture and you judged me.
Well, no, that wasn't a lecture. They were showing us a film, weren't they? They were showing us like a really like it was a great film, and you just were like nodding.
Really powerful film, and me and another friend was just outright asleep.
Because I just remember, I remember afterwards, like everyone was like, "Oh my god, that film was like so intense," and it was like really, it really blew everyone's minds, and like no one was expecting it to be what it was, and yeah, you'd slept through it. What was it called? It was 1 second,
I can't remember. Again, no consequence of the film. Like it wasn't the film's fault.
I'll find out the name of the film for the next podcast because I'm curious. I just need to. I'm just going to do a little bit of googling to track it down, but it was great. But anyway,
no, Wayne's World, great choice.
Yeah, I think so because I just think like normally I don't like to like double up with similar things. Like if we go comedy one week, like I might go like for a family film the next, or like a horror film or an action film or something. Just try and mix it up as much as possible. But I think I laid a gauntlet. I said I'd put money on Wayne's World holding up a lot better than Dumb and Dumber. Why not prove that or lose that bet next week?
Well, I mean, that's one of those things where I didn't know it was a competition, so I don't think we should treat it like a competition.
No, it wasn't a competition. I just put that. I laid that theory down myself this week.
Yeah.
No. I'm not suggesting it's a competition to like select movies that work better. I was saying we've watched this one. It didn't hold up. I was convinced. I would have chosen this movie as easily as you did. This is a movie from my childhood that I had very fond memories of. I'm more referring to my own gauntlet that I laid down in this episode when I said I would put money on Wayne's World holding up better.
Yeah. No, it's. I think
I went. Actually, do I know that? Because I wouldn't have said this movie would have held up as poorly as it did. Am I going to be disappointed in Wayne's World? So let's find out. Let's watch Wayne's World.
Yeah. It's a great choice. Great choice.
Happy to do it. I'm very excited. Very excited.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. So thanks everyone for listening. You can get us
great
on
choices.
The usual places. I'm not going to do the big long spiel I always do here. I'll just do a shorter version of it. Twitter at Dan Doolan at C Billingham. You can get us if you send your thoughts to us on email mail at nothingbutstatic.co.uk. You can get us on YouTube, youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. You can go to the Patreon where you can get episodes of this very podcast 1 week ahead of time. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes or any of those places, guess what? You can get the Wayne's World podcast right now by going over and giving as little as $1 a month to the Patreon. Other than that, I think that might be everything. Is it that? Can it be done that quickly? Do I waste a lot of time every week?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think you're fine.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's everything. Everything. You can support us in all those ways. You can leave a nice review. We said last week, leave a review with a film that you have nostalgia for and why. Tell us the story of how you first saw it, maybe, or if you want to leave a review, don't review our podcast. Just tell us about a film you're very nostalgically fond of and why. Whether it has a nice story attached to how you watched it, or whether you just have fond memories of the actual film itself. Yeah, let us know. I'd be curious to see some of them, and if we see some nice ones, we might maybe I'll read them out on a future episode. We can get some of your experiences of watching of nostalgic movies. Maybe you can even tell us about an experience where you watched one and it didn't hold up and you're disappointed about it now. I'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So throw them in the reviews. So that's everything. Thank you guys for listening so much. We appreciate you all. And we'll be back, I guess, in a week's time for more of this. So yeah, in the meantime, I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Wayne's World.